Cheers and whistles rang out across Gaza City early on Friday as a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas came into effect. Brazil has detected its first cases of the COVID-19 variant first found in India, in crew members who arrived aboard an Asian cargo ship, as announced by officials in Maranhão state. In Colombia, the strike committee called for a new day of national mobilizations for May 26 and 28. Hello, welcome to From the South. I am Janet Perez Moya from the teleSUR studios in La Habana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Stay with us. Cheers and whistles rang out across Gaza City early on Friday as a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas came into effect. Across the Gaza Strip, residents took to the street to celebrate the cessation of hostilities after an 11-day of conflict that left hundreds dead. The ceasefire began at 2 a.m. local time after both Israel and Hamas accept an Egyptian proposal to end the violence. At least 243 Palestinians were killed, including 66 children and 39 women during the conflict, with 1,100 people wounded, according to the Gaza Health Ministry. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's security cabinet approved on Thursday a ceasefire to halt the 11-day military operation in the occupied Gaza Strip. The decision followed international pressure to halt the offensive. Israel and Hamas, the Palestinian Resistance Movement, entered a mutual ceasefire at 2 a.m. on Friday. Netanyahu's office said in a statement that Israel's security cabinet had agreed to accept an Egyptian proposal for a mutual ceasefire without any preconditions. Meanwhile, far-right Israeli lawmakers, including some of Netanyahu's closest political allies, warned him against a ceasefire agreement with Hamas resistance. At least 230 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli airstrikes on the Gaza Strip over the past 11 days, according to Gaza health officials. Airstrike rocked the Gaza Strip late on Thursday, just before Israel and Hamas announced a ceasefire, ending a devastating 11-day Israeli attack that claimed hundreds of lives. A surveillance camera in Netiv HaSara in Israel, close to the border with the occupied Palestinian territory, recorded several bright explosions lighting up the night sky. The Israeli army did not immediately specify what's being targeted in the area, from where it claimed that rockets were fired by the Palestinian Resistance Movement. This Thursday, the United Nations General Assembly met to discuss the violent situation in Palestine, while Israel continued with its attacks against the population, with a death toll of more than 100 people. The meeting was requested by Niger and Algeria, chairs of the Organization for Islamic Cooperation Group, in light of the gravity of the situation and its rapid deterioration. In a letter sent to Assembly President, both countries expressed deep regret over the serious deterioration of the situation in the occupied Palestinian territory, including its Jerusalem, due to Israel's illegal policies and practice. They also say that Israeli military aggressions against the Palestinian civilian population have caused the loss of hundreds of innocent lives, great suffering, and threatened international peace and stability. Following the announcement of a ceasefire, Egypt's representative at the United Nations announced to member states that it will fund efforts to rebuild Palestinian territory damaged in the fighting.
We have announced that we allocated $500 million in the context of an Egyptian initiative for the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip. And we also announced that the specialist Egyptian companies will be involved in the reconstruction process. Mr. President, by way of conclusion, Egypt confirms on the basis of its historic responsibilities with regard to the Palestinian question that we pursue all efforts and will provide our full capacities and efforts to ensure that the Palestinian people can enjoy security, peace and stability in within a Palestinian state on the line of the 4th of July 1967 with East Jerusalem as its capital. Thank you very much.
The Palestinian Foreign Minister sharply rejected on Thursday in the United Nations General Assembly the statement that Israel is defending itself through its offensive on the Gaza Strip and also condemned Israeli atrocities and crimes.
Re-energize the interest among everybody in order really to see things really moving ahead. We do believe that the meeting of the General Assembly has really sent very strong message to the Security Council that you have to take up your responsibility. You have to find you have to decide among yourselves, and we have really to deal with this issue very seriously. Otherwise, if you fail, then there is another option, the General Assembly. And I do believe that, the messages were very clear and were received very well among the members of the Security Council and beyond. The third message that, we heard united, strong voice from the General Assembly by so many countries. Message that was sent to the Palestinians that you are not alone, that you are, that many countries are with you, supportive, you feel what you feel, and really working very hard to end your suffering, very, very importantly. But then another message is also to Israel, that Israel cannot enjoy impunity forever, that, at least there is an opinion being really developed among so many countries in the General Assembly and outside of the General Assembly that says that Israeli impunity has to stop, and Israel has to be accountable for its own crimes that's being really committed against the Palestinian people.
This Thursday, more than 100 demonstrators rallied in Pakistani city of Karachi to demand an immediate end to the Israeli airstrikes in Gaza. The demonstration in Karachi came ahead of nationwide rallies due to the take place on Friday in support of the Palestinian people. Protesters chanted anti-Israeli and pro-Palestinian slogans as they marched on the streets. The protests took place as Pakistani Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood flew to New York to address the United Nations General Assembly meeting, which discussed the gravity of the situation and its rapid deterioration in the last few days.
It's like a long struggle, years of and decades of resistance, but now I think it's the right time to speak against Israel. All the media blockage and so many other things have been happening, and it's about time that we all should gather, come out on the roads and demand justice for our Palestinian brothers and sisters.
We'll go now to a short break. Follow us on Twitter at teleSUR English and Perez Moya at teleSUR for more news.
Every year, thousands of people leave their homeland to reach new horizons. A reality of those people who struggle for their freedom. Know the diverse causes of those who live between borders. Thursdays, only on teleSUR. Pakistani journalist Tariq Ali analyzes the international media influence driven by the empire, access and analysis of political, economic and social life throughout Latin America through our stream and website in English. A critical space committed to truth to determine the conjuncture that moved the world today. The World Today. Mondays on teleSUR.
Welcome back. Brazil has detected its first cases of the COVID-19 variant first found in India in crew members who arrived aboard an Asian cargo ship, as announced by officials in Maranhão state.
In all 6 samples, people tested positive for the Indian variant B.1.617.2, which has variant qualified as a variant of attention. Going to take with regard to the people who had contact with these 3 patients, because 3 left the ship. We'll continue with the tracking. Our determination is that we will do the entire tracking of everyone, so it is about 100 people. Not everyone has contact with them, but it's necessary to do it.
This Thursday, Regional Director for Africa at the World Health Organization, Dr. Matshidiso Moeti, warned that time is running out for African countries to close the gap on vaccines inequality, noting that fewer than 2% of people on the continent have received a COVID-19 vaccine jab compared to 80% in high-income nations.
So when we look at access to the vaccines, we see great inequalities across countries. Seychelles is one of the most vaccinated countries in the world, with 67% of the population having received at least 1 dose. In Morocco, they've reached 29%, and in Mauritius, 17%. Whereas in 14 African countries, less than 1% of the population has received a single dose, and in 4 countries, vaccination hasn't started at all. COVID-19 vaccine shipments to African countries have slowed down to a trickle this month because of the reliance on India as one of the key manufacturers globally and the devastating surge of cases that that country is dealing with. The continent was expecting 66 million doses through COVAX from February to May, but instead has so far received only 18.2 million.
Irish Foreign Minister Simon Coveney and his French counterpart Jean-Yves Le Drian criticized Britain for attempting to unravel elements on the Brexit divorce deal with the European Union. The post-Brexit protocol for Northern Ireland has been a source of controversy ever since it came into effect at the start of 2021, and British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's government has made unilateral moves to alter it.
The United Kingdom have made commitments, and they need to follow through on those commitments, and we will help them to do that in a way that is politically, I hope, saleable for the British government. But let's not entertain the idea of unilaterally breaking your word effectively. The United Kingdom have made...
It will occur to you that British dignity and honor will make them renounce something that has just been ratified. That would be staggering.
Azerbaijan is ready for peace talk with Armenia. President Ilham Aliyev said Thursday, 6 months after the Caucasus neighbor fought a war over the disputed Nagorno-Karabakh region.
Several times said that we are ready to start working on peace agreement with Armenia. In order to put an end to a war, in order to minimize or eliminate any risk of potential military standoff, we need to have a peace agreement, we need to have a border delimitation with Armenia. All that needs joint efforts. We cannot do it unilaterally.
On Thursday, Syrian residents all over the world voted in their embassies and consulates for next week's presidential election. In the capital, Damascus, there are more than 1,000 polling stations set up in every part of the city. These presidential elections will be held in 2 phases, the first on May 20 for citizens living abroad, and the second on May 26 for those who reside in the country. Local media showed hundreds of Syrians lining up to vote at the polling stations set up in Syrian embassies in Lebanon, Australia, Russia, among other countries. In the meantime, Syrian Deputy Foreign Minister announced that some countries, such as Turkey, Germany, denied Syrians resident in their territory this constitutional right and stated that this decision constitutes a violation of international law. United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, the first high-level encounter between the United States and Russia since President Joe Biden took office. The discussion, which took place during the Arctic Council ministerial, touched on a wide range of issues underlying the tense relationship between Washington and Moscow. On the first in-person meeting, both administrations acknowledged that despite having serious difference in how they view world affairs, they agreed that both sides can still find ways to work together. Secretary Blinken highlighted that Russia and the United States have many areas of interest, including the COVID-19 pandemic and climate change. On the other hand, Russian foreign minister said that the talks were honest, factual, and respectful.
The conversations appear constructive to me. There is an understanding of the need to overcome the unhealthy ties between Moscow and Washington in recent years. There are a lot of logjams in the two countries' ties, and working through them is not easy, but I sense the determination of Anthony Blinken and his team to do it. We will not be found wanting. We've agreed to continue our joint actions, which are developing rather successfully, on regional conflicts where US and Russian interests overlap.
In the meantime, the 8 countries bordering at the Arctic met in Iceland to discuss peaceful cooperation in the region. Accelerated global warming, untapped resources and new maritime routes, as well as the future of local populations, were among the main issues of the agenda for the foreign ministers. With the departure of former U.S. President Donald Trump, all eyes will now be on the line adopted by Joe Biden's administration. Meanwhile, Russia is set to succeed Iceland on the rotating chair of the Arctic Council, a body which aims to foster talks at the time that increase military maneuvers in the region. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that the Arctic should remain an area of peace, stability, and international cooperation.
We believe that the Arctic should remain the territory of peace, stability, and constructive cooperation. And today we have highlighted again at the meeting that we see no grounds for conflict here, even more so for any development of military programs of some blocs here. And we are satisfied to note that most of our partners agree with us on this, and we are convinced that only full partnership can ensure the prosperity of the region.
The Labor Department said on Thursday that fewer Americans sought unemployment benefits last week, the latest encouraging sign for the rebounded U.S. economy, just as Republican-led states are moving to cut off federal benefits for the jobless. 22 states plan to be unblocking a $300 a week federal payment for the unemployment starting in June. Florida is considering ending the supplemental payment, and Nebraska has said it will maintain the payments while it evaluates all pandemic-related jobless benefits. Thus, cut-off coincided with the steady decline in the number of Americans seeking unemployment aid, which fell last week to 444,000, a new pandemic low. For news in a minute, join us again after this.
Movimientos que rompen estereotipos para generar relaciones de igualdad. Luchas que reivindican el derecho a elegir y a estar presentes para poder avanzar. Con género. Un espacio donde la diversidad, el diálogo y la equidad hace la diferencia. Jueves. Solo por teleSUR.
Welcome back. In Colombia, the strike committee called for a new day of national mobilization for May 26 and 28. Social movements and unions announced that they will continue to protest for their demands. Since the protests began, the strike committee demanded a talk table to agree on measures aimed to improving the living conditions of the population, among other requests. However, no meeting left positive conclusions, and the demonstrations has been continuous despite police repression. Likewise, the committee will demand the executive branch to allow the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights to assess the consequence of police action. After 23 days of social mobilizations in rejection of Ivan Duque's neoliberal policies, new repressive actions were registered this Wednesday in several cities of Colombia. According to a representative of human rights organizations, on Wednesday night, officers of mobile anti-riot squad violently repressed protesters in the front of a hospital in the city of Popayán, in the department of Cauca, affecting patients and medical personnel of the healthcare center. During the new day of repression in the city of Bucaramanga, Santander, students of the Industrial University request the creation of humanitarian corridor for the transfers of the wounded. The demonstrators assured that on Wednesday night, 2 tanks of the National Police broke into the university campus. In the Colombian capital, they also report attacks by the law enforcement agents against civilians who were protesting at the station Portal de las Américas. Violent actions by police forces were also reported in the city of Pasto, Nariño. The city of Medellín was another locality where acts of repression were reported, leaving dozens of people injured. Since the beginning of the protests in Colombia on April 28, more than 2,800 cases of police violence have been reported in the country. According to NGO Temblores that monitors the police brutality case in the country, between April 28 and May 17, 384 Colombians have been victims of direct law enforcement violence during the demonstrations and 146 gunshot wounded. Also, the organization reports 43 murders perpetrated by public force and 1,139 arbitrary detentions. 33 protesters have eye injuries due to the frequent police shooting at demonstrators' faces. Temblores also report 21 women have been sexually assaulted and 6 people suffer gender-based violence. Cuban Economy Minister Alejandro Gil stressed on Thursday that the U.S. President Joe Biden has not moved policies on Cuba at all since they arrived at the White House, and that the island economy has continued to suffer the limitations, restrictions, and pressures of U.S. sanctions. The minister also noted that despite the U.S. blockade, it has been possible to care for the population during the pandemic.
We have experience in how to calculate the damage of the blockade. And last year, the calculation showed that the impact of the country's economy is around $5.5 billion. And if we take the last years, we are talking about $17 billion. We can repeat that the country has had to invest only for all the issues that have to do with the PCR COVID-19 test, more than $300 million. We are talking about more than 20,000, 23,000 PCR daily.
On Thursday, former Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva confirmed for the first time that he intends to be a candidate in the 2022 presidential elections. Lula da Silva made this announcement after 19 months in prison and a long legal battle. Meanwhile, in Brazil, the COVID-19 pandemic has caused more than 400,000 deaths, and the value of the local currency has fallen by 40% in 2020. The leader of the Workers' Party said during his interview that he fully intends to get Brazil out of the crisis worsened by the pandemic and the unpopular policies of Jair Bolsonaro. Lula also mentioned that during his presidency he developed strong ties with Europe, South America, China, and Russia. We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. For Telesur English, I am Janet Perez Moya. Thank you for watching.